The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. Read by Christopher Lee. 348 years, 6 months, and 19 days ago today, the people of Paris awoke to hear all the church bells in the triple enclosure of the city, the university, and the town in full voice. Not that the 6th of January, 1482, is a day of which history has kept any record. What had excited all the commonality of Paris on this January the 6th was the twin ceremony of Twelfth Night and the Feast of Fools. Today there was to be a bonfire on the Grève, a maypole at Braque's chapel, and a mystery play at the Palais de Justice. The people were mostly flocking the approaches to the Palais de Justice, for it was known that the Flemish ambassadors who had arrived 2 days before were intending to be present at the performance of the mystery, as well as at the election of the Fool's Pope, likewise due to take place in the Great Hall. These ambassadors, who were charged with arranging the marriage of the Dauphin to Marguerite of Flanders, had arrived in Paris only a few days before. In the centre of the hall, facing the main door and with its back to the wall, was a platform of gold brocade, onto which a private entrance had been made. It had been erected for the Flemish envoys and other important persons invited to the performance of the mystery. The play was to begin only at the 12th stroke of noon from the great palace clock. A fair number of these worthy sightseers had been shivering since break of day in front of the great steps of the palace. So, long before the hour when the ambassadors were due to arrive, all that was to be heard were complaints and imprecations against the Flemings, the Cardinal of Bourbon, Madame Marguerite of Austria, the cold, the heat, the bad weather, the Bishop of Paris, the Fool's Pope, all to the great amusement of the bands of students and men-servants distributed among the crowd, who added to its discontent with their teasing and their pranks. Just then it struck 12. "Ah," said the whole crowd as one. The students fell silent. All eyes turned towards the platform reserved for the Flemish envoys. They waited 1, 2, 3, 5 minutes, a quarter of an hour. No one came. The platform remained deserted, the stage mute. "Begin right away! The mystery! The mystery! Right away!" the people shouted. Bass and treble instruments were heard to play from inside the scaffolding, the tapestry was raised, and 4 motley characters emerged wearing make-up, mounted the steep ladder to the stage, and formed up into a line in front of the audience. The mystery was starting. There was no ear more attentive, no heart more athrob, no eye more haggard, no neck more craned anywhere in that crowd than the eye, ear, neck, and heart of the author, of the poet, good Pierre Gringoire. The good-natured applause that greeted the opening of his prologue still reverberated deep inside him, but this first ecstasy was very soon disturbed. Suddenly the door to the reserved platform, which had so far remained so inopportunely closed, opened more inopportunely still, and the booming voice of the usher brusquely announced, "His Eminence, my Lord Cardinal of Bourbon." Poor Gringoire. The entry of His Eminence threw the audience into a turmoil. All heads turned towards the platform. You could no longer hear yourself speak. The Cardinal was an exalted personage indeed, a sight of whom was every bit as good as a stage play. He made his entry, greeted the spectators with a grandee's hereditary smile for the common people, and walked slowly towards his scarlet velvet armchair, followed by the Austrian and Flemish ambassadors, including Maître Jacques Coppenole of the town of Ghent. Gringoire hoped that the remainder of his work would be heard. Silence had in fact been restored among the audience after a fashion, but Gringoire had not noticed that at the time when the cardinal gave the order to continue, the platform was far from being full. Imagine an usher barking out in the middle of a play such asides as Maître Jacques Charmolue, King's Procurator in the Ecclesiastical Court, Gérant de Harlay, Squire, Keeper of the Office of Chevalier of the Night Watch in the town of Paris, and so on and so forth. The play was doomed. It was as if a magic and invisible thread had suddenly drawn all eyes to the platform. Every eye remained fixed there, and the new arrivals formed a continual distraction. It was heartbreaking. Nobody was listening. Nobody stood facing the poor abandoned mystery. However, the usher's brutal monologue ceased. Everyone had arrived, and Gringoire breathed again. The actors went bravely on, and now Maître Coppenole suddenly stood up, with every eye upon him, and Gringoire heard him deliver this abominable harangue. "Burgesses of Paris, I don't know what we're doing here. If that's what you call a mystery, it's not much fun. Nothing's happened. They should have brought some wrestlers from London or Rotterdam. They should have given us a Moorish dance or some other mummery. I was promised a feast of fools with the election of the Pope. We have our own fool's Pope in Ghent. And here's how we go about it. We gather a crowd. Then everyone in turn goes and sticks his head through a hole and pulls a face at the others. The one who pulls the ugliest face and gets the most applause is elected Pope. There. At least it'll be less tedious than listening to these chatterboxes." Gringoire would have liked to reply, but rage and indignation deprived him of the power of speech. He could only let himself be swept along by the torrent. In a twinkling, Coppenole's idea was all ready to be put into effect. The face-pulling contest would be staged in the small chapel opposite the platform. It was agreed that the contestants should stick their heads through a round hole in the stonework of the pretty rose window above the door. To reach this, they merely had to clamber up on two barrels, roughly balanced one on top of the other. From where he sat, Coppenole was in complete command. The cardinal felt just as affronted as had Gringoire, and under cover of the upheaval, he withdrew along with his retinue. The face-pulling began. Picture to yourself a succession of faces displaying all the known geometrical shapes, one after the other, every known human expression, every age of man, every kind of animal profile. It was as if all the masks at a Venetian carnival had followed one another under your eye. In a word, a human kaleidoscope. The great hall was nothing more than a huge, fiery furnace of shamelessness and joviality. The strange faces which came one by one to gnash their teeth at the rose window were like so many brands being hurled into the brazier. As for Gringoire, he was the only spectator left at his play. It was much worse than before. He could see only backs. And soon there was a thunder of applause mingled with deafening cheers. The fool's Pope had been elected. And the grimace just then lighting up the hole in the rose window was wonderful indeed. We shall not try to give the reader any idea of that tetrahedral nose, of that horseshoe mouth, of the tiny left eye obstructed by a bushy red eyebrow, while the right eye had vanished entirely beneath an enormous wen, of those irregular teeth, notched here and there like castle battlements, of that horny lip on which a tooth encroached like an elephant's tusk, of that cleft chin, and above all of the facial expression itself, with its crowning mixture of malice, astonishment, and sadness.